The December rain hammers against the windows of Cafe Bellini like accusations, each drop a reminder that Giulia Moretti's life is unraveling faster than she can comprehend. She stands behind the espresso machine, her hands trembling as she wipes down the chrome surface for the third time in as many minutes. The cafe is nearly empty, just two elderly men playing cards in the corner, and a woman scrolling through her phone near the window. The normalcy of it all feels like a cruel joke. Giulia's phone buzzes in her apron pocket. She pulls it out, her stomach clenching when she sees another message from an unknown number. The words are simple, direct, terrifying. You have until midnight. Pay what you owe or disappear. She deletes it immediately, as if erasing the message could erase the reality it represents. But the debt doesn't disappear. 50,000 euros. Money she never borrowed, attached to a name she spent 5 years trying to forget. Her ex-boyfriend, Tommaso. The man who swept her off her feet when she was 23, fresh out of university with dreams of becoming a translator. The man who slowly isolated her from her friends, controlled her finances, and eventually forged her signature on loan documents she didn't know existed until 6 months ago when the collectors started calling. By then, Tommaso had vanished, leaving her holding a debt to people who don't accept excuses or payment plans. The door chimes, pulling Giulia from her spiraling thoughts. She looks up and her breath catches. The man who enters doesn't belong in Cafe Bellini. Everything about him screams wealth and danger in equal measure. He's tall, perhaps mid-30s, with dark hair styled perfectly despite the rain. His charcoal suit fits him like it was painted on, and water beads off the expensive fabric as if even nature knows better than to mar him. But it's his eyes that freeze Giulia in place, dark, assessing, and fixed directly on her with an intensity that makes her skin prickle. He approaches the counter with measured steps, his expensive shoes barely making a sound on the worn tile floor. The elderly men stop their card game. The woman by the window glances up, then quickly looks away. Everyone in the cafe can feel it. The shift in atmosphere, the presence of someone who exists in a different world than they do. Espresso, he says, his voice smooth and deep, with the faintest hint of a northern Italian accent. Doppio. Giulia nods, not trusting her voice. Her hands shake as she operates the machine, hyper-aware of his eyes following her every movement. She's served thousands of customers in her 2 years at Bellini's, but none have ever made her feel so exposed, so seen. When she places the small cup in front of him, their fingers brush for the briefest moment. His skin is warm, and the contact sends an electric jolt up her arm. Giulia Moretti, he says, and it's not a question. Her blood turns to ice. I'm sorry, do we know each other? A slight smile curves his lips, not quite reaching his eyes. No, but I know you. He takes a sip of the espresso, his gaze never leaving her face. Excellent. You have skilled hands. The compliment feels dangerous somehow, weighted with meaning she can't quite grasp. Giulia glances toward the back room where her manager, old Signor Bellini, is doing inventory. She could call out, ask for help, but what would she say? This man hasn't threatened her. He's just a customer who somehow knows her name. How do you, she begins. Tommaso Ricci, he interrupts smoothly. Charming man, terrible with money, worse with the truth. He sets down his cup with precise care. He accumulated quite a debt before he disappeared, 50,000 euros give or take, and he was foolish enough to use your name as collateral. Giulia's knees weaken. She grips the counter for support. You're one of them, the collectors. No, he says, and something in his tone makes her believe him. I'm much worse. He reaches into his jacket and Giulia's heart stops, but he only withdraws a slim leather wallet. He places several bills on the counter, far more than the espresso costs. What I am, Signorina Moretti, is someone who pays attention when interesting things cross my desk. What things? She whispers. His eyes darken with something she can't identify. Anger? Concern? 3 days ago, the men you owe money to sold your debt. Such things happen in certain circles. Debts are currency, leverage, entertainment. He pauses, letting his words sink in. But this particular sale was unusual. The buyer paid triple the amount you owe. Julia's mind reels, trying to process this information. I don't understand. Why would someone pay more than I owe? Because, Julia, he says, using her first name with an intimacy that feels both inappropriate and somehow natural. They didn't buy your debt. They bought you. He lets the words hang in the air between them, heavy and impossible. There's a price on your head, and someone very interested in collecting. The cafe spins around her. This can't be happening. Debts, she understands. Collection agencies, threats, even violence. These are things she's been terrified of for months. But this, being sold like property, hunted like prey, this is beyond her worst nightmares. Who? She manages to ask. Who would? His name is Enzo Caruso, the man says, his voice hardening. He runs most of the trafficking operations in northern Italy. Women, specifically. Young, educated, desperate women with no family to ask questions. His eyes bore into hers. Like you. Julia's hand flies to her mouth. She's going to be sick. The room tilts, and suddenly the stranger is around the counter, his hand steady on her elbow, guiding her to a chair before her legs give out completely. He moves with practiced efficiency, filling a glass with water from behind the counter and pressing it into her, shaking hands. Breathe, he commands softly. Slowly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. She obeys, the simple act of breathing becoming her entire focus. The elderly men have abandoned their card game, watching with concerned expressions. The woman by the window has her phone out, probably ready to call for help. But the stranger raises a hand toward them, a subtle gesture that somehow communicates everything is under control. Remarkably, they listen. Who are you? Julia asks when she can finally speak. He returns to his side of the counter, maintaining a respectful distance now, as if aware he's already invaded too much of her space. My name is Marco Santoro, he says, and I'm what you might call a problem solver. A problem solver, she repeats numbly. Among other things. He finishes his espresso in one smooth motion. I own various businesses throughout Italy, restaurants, hotels, import-export companies, all legitimate, I assure you. The way he says it suggests there are other businesses, less legitimate ones, that he's not mentioning. I have resources, information networks, the ability to make certain problems disappear. Why are you telling me this? Julia's voice cracks. Why do you care about my problems? Marco's expression softens almost imperceptibly. Because, Julia, I knew your father. The world stops. Julia stares at him, certain she's misheard. My father died when I was 12. A car accident. Yes, Marco says quietly. 16 years ago. I was 19 at the time, just starting to work for my own father. He pulls out his phone, scrolls for a moment, then turns it to show her a photograph. It's old, the color slightly faded, showing two men standing in front of a restaurant. One is clearly a younger version of Marco. The other, her breath catches, is her father. She'd recognize that smile anywhere. Paolo Moretti saved my life, Marco says, pocketing his phone. I was young, stupid, made enemies I shouldn't have made. Your father intervened, paid a debt I couldn't pay, and never asked for anything in return. His jaw tightens. 2 months later, his car went off a bridge. The official report said, brake failure. Julia's hands clench around the water glass. You're saying my father's death wasn't an accident. I'm saying there were questions that were never answered, Marco replies carefully. Your mother wanted to move on, to protect you. I respected that. But I never forgot the debt I owed Paolo Moretti. He leans forward slightly, his presence commanding even in stillness. When your name appeared on certain lists, when I learned what Tommaso had done and who had bought your debt, that debt came due. The implications crash over her like waves. Her father, possibly murdered. This stranger, connected to that past. Her own life, now hanging in the balance of criminal transactions she never agreed to. It's too much, too fast, too impossible. Someone, put a price on your head, Marco continues, his voice calm despite the horror of his words. Lucky for you, I just bought you. Giulia's head snaps up. You what? I outbid Caruso, Marco says simply. Paid 5 times the original debt amount. As of 3 hours ago, you belong to me. He says it without emotion, a simple statement of fact that makes her blood boil despite her terror. I don't belong to anyone, she says, her voice stronger than she feels. I'm not property. For the first time, genuine approval flickers across Marco's face. No, you're not. Which is why I'm here, in person, having this conversation instead of simply collecting what I bought. He straightens, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced elegance. You have a choice to make, Giulia. You can walk out of here tonight. Try to disappear on your own. Hope Caruso doesn't find you before you cross enough borders to maybe, possibly be safe. He pauses. Or you can come with me. Come with you where? Her voice is barely a whisper. I have a home outside Bologna, secure, private, with staff who know how to be discreet. You would stay there, under my protection, while I handle the Caruso situation. Marco's eyes never waver from hers. You would be safe, comfortable, free to move about the property, to live without looking over your shoulder every moment. In exchange for what? Giulia asks, because nothing in life is free, especially not from men like Marco Santoro. In exchange for time, he says. Time for me to dismantle Caruso's interest in you, to ensure he understands pursuing you would cost more than any perceived value you might have to him. Marco pulls a business card from his pocket and places it on the counter. And in exchange for your company. The words hang between them, loaded with possibility and danger. My company, Giulia repeats slowly. I spend a great deal of time alone, Marco says, his tone almost conversational. I attend dinners, galas, business meetings, where having someone intelligent and presentable at my side would be valuable. You speak 4 languages according to your university transcripts. You understand art, literature, culture. You would be an asset. You want me to be your escort, Giulia says flatly. I want you to be yourself, Marco corrects. Educated, articulate, alive. Nothing more, nothing less. He glances at his watch, the gesture subtle but pointed. The decision is yours, Giulia. But Caruso's men know where you work, where you live, your routine. They're waiting for the sale to finalize before they collect. That happens at midnight. His eyes meet hers again, dark and intense. You have 3 hours. Giulia's mind races. 3 hours to decide between the devil she doesn't know and the certainty of becoming merchandise for a trafficking ring. It's no choice at all, really, and Marco knows it. But something in his directness, his honesty about the situation, makes her want to trust him, despite every instinct screaming at her to run. If I come with you, she says slowly, what happens to the debt? The 50,000 euros? Forgiven, Marco says immediately. You owe me nothing, Giulia. The money was already spent the moment I decided to intervene. This isn't about profit. Something flickers in his expression, too quick to identify. Consider it payment on an old debt to your father. And if I want to leave? After you've handled Caruso? Then you leave, Marco says simply. I'm not in the business of keeping prisoners. I'm offering protection, not a cage. He picks up his cup, examining it as if the pattern on the china is suddenly fascinating. Though I hope, perhaps, you might choose to stay longer than necessity demands. There's something in the way he says it, a hint of vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, that makes Julia look at him differently. This man, this dangerous problem solver with his expensive suits and casual mentions of criminal enterprises, is lonely. The realization surprises her. Before she can respond, the cafe door opens again. 2 men enter, their eyes immediately scanning the interior before landing on Julia. They're not subtle about their purpose. Everything about them screams danger, from their ill-fitting jackets that barely conceal weapons to the predatory way they assess her like merchandise. Marco notices her expression change, follows her gaze, and his entire demeanor shifts. The polite customer vanishes, replaced by something cold and lethal. He straightens to his full height, positioning himself subtly between Julia and the newcomers. The gesture is protective, possessive, and completely instinctive. "Gentlemen," Marco says, his voice carrying across the small cafe with unmistakable authority. "You're in the wrong establishment." The larger of the 2 men, scarred and mean-looking, sneers. "We're exactly where we need to be. Got business with the girl." His Italian is rough, his accent marking him as Sicilian. "Had business," Marco corrects smoothly. Past tense. The transaction was completed hours ago. Check with your employer if you doubt me. The 2 men exchange glances. The smaller one, wiry and nervous, pulls out a phone and steps aside, speaking in low, urgent tones. The larger one keeps his eyes fixed on Julia, undressing her with his gaze in a way that makes her skin crawl. Marco takes a single step forward, and the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. "Look at her again like that," he says quietly, "and I'll remove your eyes." It's not a threat. It's a promise, delivered with such calm certainty that even the scarred man flinches. Marco doesn't raise his voice, doesn't gesture, doesn't need to. His presence alone is weapon enough. The smaller man returns, his face pale. Whatever he heard on the phone has clearly rattled him. "Boss says the deal went through this afternoon. Different buyer. We're to apologize for the confusion." "And?" Marco prompts. The man swallows hard. "And to convey Signor Caruso's respects to Signor Santoro." "Better," Marco says. He doesn't move, doesn't relax his stance until both men have backed out of the cafe and disappeared into the rainy night. Only then does he turn back to Julia, his expression softening fractionally. "Your shift ends at 8, correct?" Julia nods, still processing what just happened, how quickly Marco's presence alone had diffused a potentially violent situation. "A car will be waiting outside at 8:15, Marco says. "Black Mercedes, license plate RM4728. The driver's name is Luca. He's been with me for 10 years. He'll take you home to pack essentials, then bring you to my property." He pauses. "Or he'll take you to the train station, or the airport, or wherever you want to go. The choice is yours, Julia. Always." "Why?" The question bursts from her before she can stop it. "Why are you really doing this? Don't tell me it's just because of my father. That was 16 years ago." Marco is silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face, as if memorizing every detail. "Because," he finally says, "the world has taken enough from you. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth saving." He picks up his business card from the counter and presses it into her palm, his fingers warm against hers. 8:15, Julia. I hope you'll be there." Then he's gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and the warmth where his hand touched hers. Julia stares at the card in her palm, at the embossed name and phone number, at the choice it represents. Signor Bellini emerges from the back room, his weathered face creased with concern. "Julia, are you all right?" "Those men, I'm fine," she says automatically, though nothing about her situation is fine. She looks down at the card again, running her thumb over the raised letters of Marco's name. The last hours of Julia's shift pass in a blur. She goes through the motions, serving the few remaining customers, wiping tables, restocking supplies, but her mind is elsewhere. Every time the door opens, her heart jumps, half expecting Caruso's men to return, or Marco, or something worse she can't even imagine. The business card burns in her pocket like a talisman, a promise, a threat. She's not sure which. At 8 o'clock, Signor Bellini tells her to go home early, his kind eyes troubled. He's seen the men, the fear in her face, and though he doesn't ask questions, she knows he's worried. Julia changes out of her apron, pulls on her worn coat, the one with the broken zipper she keeps meaning to replace but can't afford to, and steps out into the December rain. The black Mercedes is exactly where Marco said it would be, idling at the curb like a sleek predator. Through the rain-streaked window, she can see the driver, a man in his 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and a face that's seen its share of violence. He must be Luca. When he notices her standing there, hesitating on the sidewalk, he gets out and opens an umbrella, approaching her with deferential courtesy. "Signorina Moretti," he says, his voice gravelly but not unkind. "I'm Luca Ferrara. Signor Santoro sent me to collect you." He holds the umbrella over her, sheltering her from the rain. "Though I should mention, my instructions are to take you wherever you wish to go. No pressure, no judgment." Julia looks at him, trying to read his face, to understand what kind of man would work for someone like Marco Santoro. Luca meets her gaze steadily, and she sees something there that surprises her. Respect. He's not looking at her like property or merchandise or even an obligation. He's looking at her like a person whose choice matters. "If I asked you to take me to the train station," Julia says slowly, testing, "you would?" "Without hesitation," Luca replies. Signor Santoro was very clear. "Your will is paramount." Your will is paramount. The phrase is so formal, so old-fashioned, that it almost makes her laugh despite everything. But there's sincerity in Luca's voice, and she finds herself believing him. "Take me home," she says finally. "I need to pack some things. Then we'll go to Signor Santoro's property." Luca nods, offering his arm to steady her on the wet pavement. The gesture is courtly, protective without being possessive. He helps her into the back seat of the Mercedes, and the interior is warm, luxurious, smelling of leather and something subtle she can't quite place. As they pull away from the curb, Julia watches Cafe Bellini disappear in the rain, wondering if she'll ever see it again. Her apartment is in one of Bologna's older neighborhoods, where buildings crowd together like old friends, sharing secrets, and laundry hangs between windows even in winter. It's small, cramped, and the heating barely works, but it's been hers, the first place she's lived alone since leaving her mother's house. Luca parks on the narrow street and insists on accompanying her upstairs, checking the apartment before letting her enter, his hand resting casually near his jacket, in a way that tells her he's armed. "It's safe," he says, after a quick sweep of the 3 small rooms. "I'll wait outside your door. Take your time." Julia moves through her apartment in a daze, pulling clothes from her closet, toiletries from the bathroom, her laptop and a few books from the shelf by her bed. What do you pack when you don't know if you're going to a sanctuary or a prison? When you don't know if you'll ever come back? She finds herself grabbing small things, meaningless things, a photo of her parents on their wedding day, a scarf her grandmother knitted before she died, a journal she hasn't written in for months. As she's zipping her suitcase, her phone rings. Unknown number. Her hands shake as she answers. Giulia Moretti, a man's voice, smooth and cultured, speaking Italian with a Neapolitan accent. Yes? My name is Enzo Caruso. I believe we have business to discuss. Her blood turns to ice. I think you're mistaken. Don't insult either of us with pretense, Caruso interrupts, his voice hardening. I know Marco Santoro outbid me for your debt. I know you're packing right now, preparing to run to him like a frightened rabbit. He pauses, letting his words sink in. But I want you to understand something, Giulia. This isn't over. Santoro thinks he can protect you, thinks his name and his money make him untouchable. But everyone has vulnerabilities. Everyone can be reached. Why are you calling me? Giulia forces the words past her fear. If the debt is sold, if Marco owns it, then you have no claim. Caruso laughs, a sound like breaking glass. Is that what he told you? That he owns your debt? Another laugh. Oh, my dear, he owns far more than that. He purchased you completely in a transaction that won't be recorded in any legitimate ledger. You're his property now, bought and paid for. Whatever happens to you in his care, well, that's between you and Santoro. The words are designed to terrify her, to poison whatever fragile trust she's begun to feel toward Marco. And they work. Giulia's mind spins with horrible possibilities. What if Marco isn't her savior, but just another captor? What if the choice between him and Caruso is just choosing the manner of her imprisonment? You could still run, Caruso continues, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. Leave Italy entirely. I have resources that could help with that. Put you somewhere Santoro would never find you. All I'd require in return is a small favor. Some information. Nothing that would harm you. It's a lie. Giulia knows it's a lie, but the seed of doubt has been planted. She closes her eyes, trying to think clearly through her panic. Why would you help me? Because I dislike Marco Santoro, Caruso says simply. And because a woman like you, intelligent, educated, shouldn't be anyone's property. Certainly not his. A pause. The offer expires when you get in Santoro's car. After that, you're beyond my reach, beyond anyone's reach but his. Choose wisely, Giulia. The line goes dead. Giulia stares at her phone, her hands trembling so badly she nearly drops it. There's a gentle knock at the door. Signorina, Luca's voice concerned. Is everything all right? She opens the door, and Luca takes one look at her face, and his expression hardens. What happened? A phone call, Giulia whispers. From Enzo Caruso. Luca's jaw tightens. What did he say? She tells him, watching his face darken with each word. When she finishes, Luca is silent for a long moment, his hand rubbing his jaw, as if working through a difficult problem. Finally, he meets her eyes. Signorina Moretti, I've worked for Marco Santoro for 10 years. In that time, I've seen him do things that would keep you awake at night. I've seen him destroy men who crossed him, dismantle businesses, ruin lives. He pauses, his voice softening. But I've never, not once, seen him harm a woman. Never seen him treat anyone under his protection as property. Whatever else Signor Santoro is, he's a man of his word. And Caruso? Giulia asks. Luca's expression becomes stone. Caruso is everything you fear. And worse. The women who disappear into his operation. They're never seen again. Not whole, anyway. He steps closer, his voice urgent. I won't lie to you. Marco Santoro is dangerous, possibly the most dangerous man in northern Italy. But his danger is directed outward, at his enemies. If he's claimed you as his to protect, then you're safer with him than anywhere else in the world. Giulia wants to believe him, Looking into Luca's weathered face, seeing the conviction there, she finds she does believe him, at least about this. "Okay," she says softly. "Let's go." The drive to Marco's property takes nearly an hour, leaving the city behind for the rolling hills of the Emilian countryside. The rain has stopped, and moonlight illuminates vineyards and olive groves, ancient stone walls, and cypress trees standing sentinel against the sky. They turn off the main road onto a private drive that winds upward through manicured grounds, past a gatehouse where armed guards wave them through after recognizing Luca. The house, when it comes into view, takes Julia's breath away. It's not the ostentatious villa she expected, but something more elegant, more refined. A restored 18th century palazzo built of honey-colored stone, with arched windows that glow with warm light, and a central fountain where water dances in the moonlight. It's beautiful, impossibly beautiful, and terrifying in its perfection. Luca helps Julia from the car as the palazzo's main doors open, and a woman emerges, perhaps 60 years old with silver hair, pulled into an elegant chignon and wearing a simple but expensive black dress. Her face is kind, weathered by years, but still beautiful, and she approaches Julia with a warm smile. "Signorina Moretti, welcome," she says in cultured Italian. "I'm Margherita Conti, the house manager. Signor Santoro asked me to see you settled." She takes in Julia's worn coat, her cheap suitcase, her nervous expression, and her smile softens further. "You've had a difficult evening, I imagine. Come, let's get you warm." Margherita leads her through halls that smell of beeswax and flowers, past rooms filled with art and antique furniture, up a sweeping marble staircase to the second floor. The palazzo is both grand and lived in, expensive, but comfortable. And everywhere Julia looks, she sees evidence of Marco's refined taste. They stop at a door near the end of a long corridor. "Your rooms," Margherita says, opening the door to reveal a suite that makes Julia's entire apartment look like a closet. There's a sitting area with overstuffed chairs and a fireplace already burning cheerfully, a bedroom with a four-poster bed dressed in cream linens, and through another door, a bathroom with a marble tub big enough to swim in. "Signor Santoro thought you'd be comfortable here. The view in the morning is particularly lovely." Julia steps inside, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I can't." "You can, and you will," Margherita says, firmly but kindly. "Signor Santoro was very specific about your comfort. There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you. Nothing too formal, just comfortable things. Dinner will be served in an hour if you're hungry, or I can have something brought up if you'd prefer privacy." She moves toward the door, then pauses. "Julia, may I speak plainly?" Julia nods, grateful for the older woman's directness. "I've worked for the Santoro family since Marco was a boy," Margherita says. "I watched him grow from a sweet child into a hard man. The life he leads, the things he must do, they've cost him much." Her eyes are knowing, sad. "But beneath it all, there's still that boy who cried when we had to put down his dog, who brings me flowers on my birthday, who pays for his staff's children to go to university. Whatever you've been told, whatever you fear, remember that Marco Santoro is complicated, but he's not cruel. Not to those under his protection." "Why are you telling me this?" Julia asks softly. Margherita smiles. "Because I see how he looks at you, child, and I haven't seen him look at anyone that way in a very long time." She touches Julia's arm gently. "Give him a chance, that's all I ask." After Margherita leaves, Julia explores her suite in a daze. The wardrobe is indeed full of clothes, all in her size, all in styles that somehow seem chosen specifically for her. Comfortable cashmere sweaters, soft jeans, elegant dresses for evenings. Nothing ostentatious, nothing overtly seductive, just beautiful quality pieces. How did Marco know her size, her style, her preferences? The same way he knew everything else about her, she supposes. His investigation had been thorough. She showers in the enormous bathroom, standing under water hot enough to scald, trying to wash away the terror and confusion of the past few hours. When she finally emerges, wrapped in a plush robe that's also perfectly her size, she finds a tray has been delivered to her sitting room. Fresh bread, local cheese, sliced prosciutto, a bowl of pasta in a light cream sauce, and a glass of red wine. Her stomach reminds her she hasn't eaten since morning. Julia is finishing the pasta when there's a knock at her door. Her heart jumps. "Come in," she calls, setting down her fork. Marco enters, and seeing him here, in his own home, is different from the cafe. He's changed from his suit into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that makes his shoulders look even broader. His hair is slightly damp, as if he's also just showered, and without the armor of his business attire, he seems more human, more accessible. But those dark eyes are the same, intense and watchful. "Julia," he says, his voice warm, "I hope the accommodations are acceptable." "They're more than acceptable," she replies, suddenly self-conscious in her robe. "They're overwhelming." Marco's lips quirk in a small smile. "I tend toward excess in some things." He gestures to the chairs by the fireplace. "May I sit? I promise this won't take long. You must be exhausted." She nods, and they settle into the chairs, the fire crackling between them. For a moment, neither speaks, and Julia studies him in the firelight. There are shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, signs that this evening has cost him something too. "Caruso called me," Julia says finally, "while I was packing." Marco's expression hardens. "What did he say?" she tells him, watching his face darken with each word. When she finishes, Marco is silent for a long moment, his hand steepled under his chin, his jaw working. "He's right about one thing," Marco says finally. "I did purchase you, in the language of their world. A financial transaction that gives me legal claim to your debt, and by extension to you." He leans forward, his eyes intense. "But Julia, that transaction was only necessary to pull you out of Caruso's reach. The paperwork, the money, it's all a fiction we maintain because the world we operate in requires such fictions." "And in reality," Julia prompts. "In reality, you're a guest in my home," Marco says simply. "Free to leave whenever you choose, free to live your life however you see fit once the Caruso situation is resolved." He pauses. "What I told you in the cafe was true. All of it. I owe a debt to your father, and this is how I choose to repay it. Nothing more, nothing less." "Nothing more?" Julia echoes, thinking of Margarita's words about how Marco looks at her. Something flickers across Marco's face, too quick to identify. "I won't lie to you, Julia. I find you intriguing. Your intelligence, your courage in the face of what you've endured, the way you speak 4 languages, and graduated top of your class, despite working 2 jobs to pay for university." He holds her gaze. "But my interest doesn't entitle me to anything. Your presence here, your company, if you choose to give it, these are gifts, not obligations." Julia's heart pounds against her ribs. She should be terrified, should be planning her escape. But instead, she finds herself drawn to this complicated, dangerous man who speaks of debts and honor like a character from another century. "What happens now?" she asks. "Now you rest," Marco says, standing. "Tomorrow, I'll explain the full situation with Caruso, what steps I'm taking to ensure your safety. We'll discuss what role you're comfortable playing in social situations, if any. And you'll begin to understand that this house, however gilded it may seem, is your cage, only if you choose to see it that way." He moves toward the door, then pauses. "Julia, I need you to know something," My world is not kind. The things I do, the compromises I make, they would horrify you if you knew the full extent. But I swear to you on my father's grave and on the memory of yours, while you're under my protection, no harm will come to you. Not from Caruso, not from anyone, and certainly not from me. Why should I believe you? The question comes out softer than she intends. Not a challenge, but genuine curiosity. Marco is silent for a long moment, his hand on the doorframe, his back to her. When he speaks, his voice is so quiet she almost doesn't hear it. Because you're the first person in 15 years I've wanted to be honest with. He turns, and in the firelight, his face is vulnerable in a way that steals her breath. I could tell you it's strategy, that honesty serves my purposes. But the truth is simpler and more complicated. When I look at you, Julia, I don't see an obligation or a transaction. I see someone I don't want to disappoint. He leaves before she can respond, the door closing softly behind him. Julia sits by the fire for a long time afterward, watching the flames dance and trying to understand how her life has transformed so completely in the span of a single day. This morning, she was a waitress drowning in debt, invisible to everyone around her. Tonight, she's in a palazzo, wearing a robe that costs more than her monthly rent, protected by a man who dismantles criminal empires before breakfast. Sleep, when it finally comes, is fitful. She dreams of her father, young and laughing, standing beside a teenaged Marco in front of a restaurant she doesn't recognize. In the dream, her father turns to her and says, "Trust him, Piccolina. He remembers his debts." She wakes just before dawn, the words echoing in her mind. The view from her window is, as Margarita promised, spectacular. The Emilian countryside spreads before her, painted in the soft colors of early morning. Vineyards march down hillsides in neat rows, and in the distance, she can see the town of Bologna, her city, looking small and far away. A different world already. She dresses in clothes from the wardrobe, soft jeans, and a cream cashmere sweater that feels like a cloud against her skin. When she ventures downstairs, following the scent of coffee and fresh bread, she finds a dining room where Margarita is setting out breakfast. "Good morning, dear," Margarita says warmly. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough," Julia lies. "Is Signor Santoro awake?" "He's been in his study since 5, Margarita replies with a knowing look. "Working, as always. But he left instructions that you're to eat first. Then he'd like to speak with you, if you're willing." Julia eats mechanically, tasting nothing despite the quality of the food. Her mind is already moving forward, trying to understand what comes next, what Marco's plan involves, what role she's expected to play. When she's finished, Margarita leads her through the palazzo to a set of carved wooden doors. "He's expecting you," Margarita says, knocking once before opening the door. Marco's study is all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows that overlook the gardens. He's sitting behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, a phone to his ear. When he sees Julia, he ends his call abruptly and stands, coming around the desk to greet her. "Thank you for joining me," he says, gesturing to a seating area away from the formal desk. "I thought we should talk about the practicalities of your situation." They settle into leather chairs, and Marco pours espresso from a silver service that's been set out. The gesture is so domestic, so at odds with the criminal negotiations she knows he conducts from this very room, that it makes her smile despite her nervousness. "You find something amusing?" Marco asks, noticing. "Just the contradiction of you," Julia admits. "One moment you're telling me about purchasing people, the next you're playing host with perfect courtesy." Marco's lips curve. "I contain multitudes," as the poet said. He sets down his cup, his expression growing serious. "Julia, I want to explain exactly what's happening with Caruso and why you're safer here than anywhere else." For the next hour, Marco lays out the situation with a directness that's both reassuring and terrifying. Enzo Caruso runs the largest human trafficking operation in northern Italy, specializing in educated women who can be placed in high-end escort services or sold to wealthy clients overseas. Tommaso, Giulia's ex-boyfriend, had accumulated debts not just to loan sharks, but to Caruso directly, and had offered Giulia as collateral, forging documents that made it appear she'd agreed to the arrangement. "The moment Tommaso disappeared, you became Caruso's property in the eyes of his organization," Marco explains, his voice grim. "He waited 6 months, let you struggle with the smaller debts first, let you become desperate enough that you might come to him directly for help. It's a strategy he uses often." "And then you intervened," Giulia says. "Then I intervened," Marco confirms. "But Giulia, you need to understand what that means. In purchasing your debt, I didn't just pay Caruso. I challenged him. I announced that you're under my protection, that anyone who touches you answers to me. In our world, that's a declaration of territorial claim." "Your world," Giulia echoes. "You keep saying that. What exactly is your world, Marco?" He's silent for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. "I run several legitimate businesses, as I told you, but I also facilitate transactions between parties who prefer to operate outside legal frameworks. Import-export, primarily, though the imports aren't always declared to customs, and the exports aren't always legal." He watches her face carefully. "I don't traffic in people, Giulia. That's a line I've never crossed. But weapons, luxury goods that bypass taxes, certain pharmaceuticals, these are the currencies of my real business." "You're a criminal," Giulia says, not an accusation but a statement of fact. "Yes," Marco agrees simply. "A wealthy, powerful criminal who operates with enough legitimacy to maintain respectability, but a criminal nonetheless." He leans forward. "Does that change things for you?" Giulia considers. 24 hours ago, the answer would have been obvious. But 24 hours ago, she hadn't seen the way Marco looked at her grandmother's photo with genuine respect, hadn't heard the loyalty in Luca's voice or the affection in Margarita's, hadn't felt the safety of these walls around her, the first safety she's known in months. "I don't know yet," she says honestly. "Ask me again in a week." Marco's expression softens with something like approval. "Fair enough." He pulls a folder from the side table and hands it to her. "This is everything we know about Caruso's current operations, his associates, his vulnerabilities. I'm sharing it with you because you have a right to understand what you're caught in the middle of." Giulia opens the folder with trembling hands, scanning pages of surveillance photos, financial records, organizational charts that map out Caruso's criminal empire like a corporate structure. It's overwhelming, the scope of it, the casual way violence and exploitation are documented in neat columns and professional photographs. "How do you fight someone like this?" she asks, looking up at Marco. "Carefully," Marco replies. "Caruso is powerful, but he's also overextended. He's made enemies, crossed lines that even in our world are considered unconscionable. I'm reaching out to those enemies, offering alliances, creating a coalition." His jaw tightens. Within 2 weeks, maybe 3, Caruso will have larger problems than one woman. He'll be too busy defending his territory to pursue you. "And if he's not?" Giulia asks. "If he decides that I'm worth the trouble?" Marco's eyes darken. "Then I'll kill him myself." The words are delivered with such casual certainty that Giulia feels a chill run down her spine. This is who Marco Santoro really is, beneath the courtesy and the expensive clothes. A man capable of murder, willing to kill to protect what's his. "I frighten you," Marco observes, noting her expression. "Yes," Giulia admits, "but probably not in the way you think." She sets down the folder, meeting his gaze directly. What frightens me is that I believe you, that I know you would kill for me, someone you barely know. What frightens me is that I'm not as horrified by that as I should be. Something flares in Marco's eyes, heat and approval, and something deeper she can't quite name. You're stronger than you realize, Julia. Stronger than Tommaso wanted you to believe. Stronger than circumstances have allowed you to show. He stands, offering his hand to help her up. Come, let me show you the rest of your prison. He gives her a tour of the palazzo, and with each room, Julia understands more about the man who lives here. There's a library with books in 6 languages, well-worn volumes of poetry sitting beside treatises on economics, a music room with a grand piano, and a violin case that looks decades old, a greenhouse where Margarita grows herbs and flowers year-round, gardens designed for contemplation, with stone benches and fountains, and paths that wind through roses and lavender. It's beautiful, Julia says, as they walk through the winter garden, her breath misting in the cold air. It doesn't feel like a criminal's home. What should a criminal's home feel like? Marco asks, amusement coloring his voice. I don't know. Darker, more threatening, less human. Marco stops walking, turning to face her. I'm still human, Julia. Whatever else I am, whatever I've done, I still appreciate beauty, still need peace, still want to come home to something that isn't just power and violence. He reaches out, almost touching her face, then drops his hand. Still want someone to share it with. The confession hangs between them, honest and vulnerable. Julia's heart races, her mind warring with her instincts. Everything logical tells her to maintain distance, to remember that Marco is dangerous, that his protection comes with invisible strings. But standing here in his garden, seeing the loneliness in his eyes, she finds herself wanting to close the distance between them. The dinner tonight, Marco says, shifting topics as if aware he's revealed too much. There will be 3 couples, business associates and their wives. Legitimate people, mostly. I'd like you to join us if you're comfortable. You don't have to participate in business discussions, but your presence would be valuable. Valuable how? Julia asks. It would signal that I'm not alone, Marco says quietly. That I have someone, that my life isn't just business. In my world, Julia, appearing settled and content makes others less likely to challenge you. They see you as having something to lose, which makes you more predictable, easier to work with. So I'd be a prop, Julia says, not quite keeping the edge from her voice. No, Marco says firmly. You'd be yourself, intelligent, charming, real. That's what makes the difference. He meets her eyes. But I won't pressure you. If you'd prefer to spend the evening in your rooms, that's equally acceptable. Julia thinks of her apartment in Bologna, of her tiny life working at Cafe Bellini, of the months she spent invisible and afraid. Here, Marco is offering her a role, temporary though it may be, in a larger world. The chance to be seen, to matter, even if it's all performance. I'll come, she decides, but I'm choosing my own dress from that wardrobe. Marco's smile is genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time. I wouldn't have it any other way. The rest of the day passes in strange domesticity. Julia explores the palazzo, finding Margarita in the kitchen preparing for the evening's dinner. The older woman welcomes her help, and they spend hours cooking together. Margarita sharing stories of Marco's childhood, of his parents, who died in a plane crash when he was 21, of how he'd transformed grief into ambition and built an empire from his father's modest holdings. He was engaged once, Margarita says as they roll out pasta dough. Beautiful girl from Milan, from a good family. But she couldn't accept what he was, what he'd become. Left him 3 days before the wedding. How long ago? Julia asks. 8 years, Margarita replies. He hasn't brought a woman here since. Oh, he has his companions, discreet arrangements in the city. But here, to his home, you're the first. She looks at Julia with knowing eyes. That means something, child, whether you're ready to acknowledge it or not. That evening, Julia dresses with care in a deep blue silk dress that reminds her of twilight. It's elegant without being ostentatious, the neckline modest but flattering. She styles her dark hair in loose waves, applies makeup with a careful hand, and when she looks in the mirror, she barely recognizes herself. This woman looks confident, expensive, like she belongs in Marco Santoro's world. Marco is waiting at the bottom of the stairs when she descends, and the look on his face when he sees her makes her breath catch. It's not just appreciation or desire, though both are there. It's wonder, as if he can't quite believe she's real. Julia, he breathes, offering his arm. You're extraordinary. The dinner guests arrive promptly at 8. 3 couples, as Marco promised, all impeccably dressed and clearly wealthy. Marco introduces her simply as, my dear friend, Julia Moretti. And if any of them wonder about her sudden appearance in his life, they're too polite to ask directly. The conversation flows in Italian and occasional English, touching on business, art, politics, the things wealthy people discuss over expensive wine. Julia finds herself relaxing, her university education serving her well, as she discusses Renaissance art with one guest's wife and the complexities of EU trade regulations with another. She catches Marco watching her several times, something like pride in his expression, and it sends warmth through her chest. After dinner, as the guests are leaving, one of the men, Alessandro Russo, draws Marco aside. Julia pretends not to listen, but their voices carry. She's special, Marco, Alessandro says in Italian. Don't let this one slip away like the last. I don't intend to, Marco replies, his voice low but certain. If she'll have me. The words echo in Julia's mind long after the guests have departed, after she said goodnight to Marco and retreated to her rooms. If she'll have me. As if the choice is hers. As if this powerful, dangerous man is waiting for her permission. She's preparing for bed when there's a soft knock at her door. Marco stands in the hallway, still in his dinner clothes, his expression uncertain. I couldn't sleep without checking on you, he says, making sure you were all right after this evening. It's a lot, meeting strangers, playing a role. It wasn't playing a role, Julia says, surprising herself with the truth of it. I was just being myself. I know, Marco says softly. That's what made it perfect. He hesitates, then adds, Julia, I received a call an hour ago, from Caruso. Her blood runs cold. What did he want? To concede, Marco says, and there's satisfaction in his voice. The coalition I mentioned, it moved faster than expected. 3 of his largest partners withdrew their support tonight. His shipments through Genoa have been seized, and 2 of his warehouses were raided by authorities who mysteriously received anonymous tips. A slight smile curves his lips. Caruso is finished, Julia. He's agreed to erase your debt completely, to never contact you or anyone associated with you again. In exchange, I've agreed not to completely destroy what remains of his operations. Julia stares at him, trying to process what this means. I'm free. Actually, free. Actually free, Marco confirms. The paperwork will be finalized tomorrow, but yes, Caruso no longer has any claim on you, financial or otherwise. His expression grows more serious. Which means, Julia, that you're also free to leave here, to return to your life in Bologna, to go anywhere you wish. I'll provide you with money to start over, enough that you'll never have to worry about debt again. A gift, not alone. The offer hangs between them, generous and genuine. This is the moment Julia should thank him, should accept his generosity and walk away from this dangerous world. But standing here, seeing the vulnerability in Marco's eyes, the hope he's trying to hide, she realizes she doesn't want to leave. "What if I don't want your money?" she asks quietly. "What if I want something else?" Marco's breath catches. "What do you want, Julia?" She steps closer, closing the distance between them. "I want to know if what I felt tonight was real, if the way you looked at me across the dinner table, the way you smiled when I made Alessandro laugh, if any of that was real." "It was real," Marco says, his voice rough with emotion. "All of it. Julia, I brought you here to protect you, to honor a debt to your father. But somewhere between the cafe and this moment, it became about more than that." He reaches out, cupping her face with gentle hands. "You could have anyone. Build any life you want. Why would you choose this? Choose me?" "Because when I look at you, I don't just see the dangerous parts," Julia says, placing her hands over his. "I see the man who kept his promise to my father 16 years after his death, who employs Margarita and pays for her grandchildren's education, who has a library full of poetry and plays piano when he thinks no one is listening." She smiles. "I see someone worth knowing, Marco. Someone worth staying for." Marco's eyes close briefly, as if her words are almost too much to bear. When he opens them again, they're bright with unshed tears. "I don't deserve you," he whispers. "Probably not," Julia agrees with a slight laugh. "But I'm choosing you anyway." He kisses her then, and it's nothing like the gentle brush of lips she expected. It's passionate, desperate, full of all the longing he's been holding back. His hands move to her waist, pulling her closer, and Julia melts into him, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally break apart, both breathless, Marco rests his forehead against hers. "Stay," he murmurs. "Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because you owe me anything. Stay because you want to. Because you want this. Want us." "I'm staying," Julia promises, "for as long as you'll have me." Marco pulls back slightly, his expression suddenly serious. "Then there's something I need to show you." He takes her hand, leading her through the palazzo to his study. From a drawer in his desk, he withdraws a small velvet box, old and worn. "This belonged to my grandmother, then to my mother. I've kept it safe for years, waiting for the right woman, the right moment." He opens the box to reveal a ring, simple but beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, Julia. We barely know each other, and you deserve time to be certain. But I want you to have this as a promise that I'll spend every day earning your trust, your love, your choice to stay." Julia's eyes fill with tears as she looks at the ring, at Marco's hopeful face. "It's beautiful," she whispers. "It suits you," Marco says. "Like everything else in this house, it's been waiting for you." He takes the ring from the box, but instead of placing it on her finger, he sets it on the desk between them. "When you're ready, if you're ready, you tell me. Until then, it's here, waiting like I'll wait, however long it takes." 3 months pass like a dream. Julia moves through the palazzo as if she's always belonged there, working alongside Margarita in the kitchen, reading in the library, learning to play piano from Marco in the evenings. She accompanies him to business dinners, where she's introduced now as "my Julia," the possessive endearment making her heart flutter every time. She learns the complexity of his world, the careful balance between legitimate business and the shadowy enterprises that fund it all. And she learns Marco himself, his unexpected gentleness, his fierce loyalty to those under his protection, the way he still grieves his parents after all these years. They're in the garden one spring evening when Julia finally makes her decision. The roses are blooming, filling the air with their sweet scent, and Marco is reading poetry aloud in the fading light, his voice turning the Italian words into music. "Marco," she says, interrupting him mid-stanza. He looks up, immediately attentive. "Yes, amore?" "I'm ready," she says simply. He understands immediately. Setting down his book, he stands and pulls her to her feet, his hands shaking slightly as he reaches into his pocket. He's been carrying the ring with him for weeks now, she realizes, waiting for this moment. "Julia Moretti," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you choose this life, choose me, knowing everything you know, seeing everything you've seen?" "Yes," Julia says, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you, Marco Santoro. I choose you, I choose this, I choose us." He slides the ring onto her finger, and it fits perfectly, as if it was always meant to be there. Then he's kissing her, lifting her off her feet, and spinning her around while she laughs against his lips. When he sets her down, his eyes are bright with joy. "I love you," he says, the words simple but weighted with everything he is. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this choice." "I know," Julia says, touching his face tenderly. "I love you too, Marco. My dangerous, complicated, beautiful man." They marry a month later in a small ceremony in the Palazzo's chapel, with only Margherita, Luca, and a handful of close friends in attendance. Julia wears her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Marco can barely speak his vows through his tears. When the priest pronounces them married, Marco kisses her like she's the most precious thing in the world. And Julia knows, whatever else comes, whatever challenges they'll face them together. 5 years later, Julia stands in the same garden where Marco proposed, watching their 3-year-old daughter, Sofia, chase butterflies through the roses, while their infant son, Paolo, sleeps in Marco's arms. Her husband catches her eye and smiles, that same smile that made her heart skip on that rainy December night, when he walked into Cafe Bellini and changed her life forever. "What are you thinking?" Marco asks, coming to stand beside her, careful not to wake their son. "That someone put a price on my head," Julia says softly, "and lucky for me, you bought me. Best purchase you ever made." Marco laughs, the sound warm and free. "The only purchase that ever mattered," he corrects, kissing her temple. "Though, I prefer to think of it as you choosing me, despite every reason not to." "I did choose you," Julia agrees, watching Sofia toddle toward them with a flower clutched in her tiny fist. "And I'd choose you again every single day." "Mama," Sofia calls, presenting her flower with great ceremony. "For you." Julia accepts the slightly crushed rose with appropriate reverence, her heart full to bursting. This life, this family, this love, born from danger and debt and impossible circumstances, it's more than she ever dreamed possible. And as Marco wraps his free arm around her waist, pulling her close while their daughter chatters about butterflies and their son stirs sleepily, Julia knows she's exactly where she belongs. In the end, the price on her head bought her not captivity, but freedom. Freedom to love, to choose, to build a life with a man who sees her as precious beyond measure. And that, she thinks, is the happiest ending of all. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories, and check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.